Welcome back to an episode of Messenger Call. This is the last video for 2019 and this is the last video for the decade. We are going to start a decade soon. So this is an awesome opportunity for me to look back and share with you what I've learned in my journey in the last 10 years. So one of the things that has eluded me for the longest time was pretty much how do we get the right product, the right software to our users and then provide the best quality that we can. Let's start with the first one, building the right thing. And it's one of the challenges that I continue to have a decade ago was trying to figure out, well, how do we know what we're building is the right thing for our users? So of course, when you look at it, the easiest way for us to know if we're building the right thing is to get feedback, right? So the feedback from the people that are actually using the software. I remember when I started my journey as a software engineer, I remember the visit that I had going to and visiting a client. And it's then when I see them using the software that I create, that's when I realized that there are things in there that in my mind was great, but doesn't really work for the user. So I had to make that change. So the only way to find out is getting the software into the hands of our users and getting that feedback. So that's key. Well, how do we do it then? One of the things that we constantly do is we build this software and it takes us a long time to deliver it to our users. So by the time it gets to the hand of users, the feedback is too long. Can we build it and get it to the hands of our users faster? So one of the things I found was that we have to deliver faster in smaller chunks, in smaller batch size. And when we start doing that, we're getting the feedback that we need to adjust as we go. We don't have to deliver everything at one single big bang effort, but we can deliver in smaller size. Now we got to be careful when we do that, right? When we do that, there's this notion of, do you want to have the words of getting dying with multiple cuts, right? Multiple paper cuts, you die with that. So imagine that. We don't want our users to suffer that. So when we do that, we still want to deliver in high quality. That means in this small batch of work that we deliver to get feedback, we still need to ensure that testing is in place. We need to ensure that it is fully tested and it does not create a problem for our users. That's what we want to deliver. So in order to do that, one of the things that I found was that it is pretty costly to do it the manual way. If we get something done in small batches and having somebody to test it every time we finish a small piece of work is pretty costly. It adds up to the cost of having to retest and retest and retest, right? So what you have to do is you have to embrace automated testing. So one of the things that's what I discovered was automated testing allow us to build in quality from the get-go. It is this automated script. So when you do that, the next time when you need to test again, you don't have to spend the time to do the manual testing, but you can just run the automated testing. So the testing takes maybe a second, less than a second, things like that. So for a package work that gets delivered each time, the testing is a lot. There might be 100, 200, 1,000 testing that gets happen. Think about Amazon, think about the Google. That's how they do work, right? So this is the things that I've learned in this decade is small batch getting feedback so that our users can tell us what's right and what's wrong. And it allows us to pivot as well. And allows us to adjust to the market. Because we're putting testing in, we no longer need to live with the fact that defect is a way of life. For the longest time, I thought, as part of software, you're going to have defects. Well, that's not the case. If you do the automate testing, if you do testing properly up front, and if you deliver small package fully tested, you don't have to live with that. And zero defect software is possible. Now, as part of reducing the size of work as well, there comes this notion of how do we organize the work? How do we, there's so many dependency. So you have to slice your work in a specific way so that you reduce those dependency. Dependency does kill us. Either you manage it or you reduce it. There's not much you can do with it, right? So you want to reduce your dependency as much as possible so you can deliver work that can be fully tested and get the feedback that we need. Now, in order to accommodate all these small batches of work, where do we put this? We got to put it somewhere where it is stable for testing purposes, for our users to get feedback from, right? So you have to have the environment fully in place in order to support that. So that's the other thing, is that making sure you have the environment ready from the start, not at the end of it. So you're thinking ahead, you're thinking about your production environment, you're thinking about pre-production environment, you're thinking about testing environment, you're thinking about a development environment, thinking it through all the way through. So as you move work from one to the other, now you have to deal with, well, how do I move this work, this small piece of work from beginning to the end so my users can see it. And you don't want to do it where it takes so long, right? So you want to get to the point where you can move through things faster. Smaller amount of work when you move through the next environment makes it easier to contain. If something goes wrong, you tend to know what it is because it is fairly small. So you want to have those in place. Now this is where, again, continuous deployment comes into play. I remember having to manually copy files and then creating batch script files to go and manipulate the server, the environment, right? So today, all those tools are available and they can be automated. So at the click of a button, things can move from one environment to the next in a what we call contained packages. The other thing I've learned is that we gotta start thinking about finishing stuff and not starting stuff. And that's the thing that I think is kind of hard, because we like to do this where we start a lot of stuff and says, hey, I've got a lot of stuff going at the same time, right? Kind of multitasking, a lot of stuff going, but I don't get anything done until everything is done. So this idea needs to change. It's one of the things that I have to adjust, is pretty much think of, okay, can I get a small piece of work done first before starting something else? And it is really hard. The notion of putting these small pieces out there to be tested, to get feedback from our users, leaves us with this notion of things that are not complete. How can I ship something that is incomplete to my users, right? So, and the other part is, can my users be open or be ready for so many small feedback, constantly asking for feedback? And sometimes that may not be possible, where there may be a group of people that we can release it to get the feedback, and then for what we call a bigger releases, we can't do that, right? So when you can't do that, then you have to get that batch size, you have to batch things up before you release it. Now there's this notion then, we do want to deploy and get feedback, but we cannot release until a specific batch is ready to go. So we got to get into the notion of releasing on demand, right? Constantly going with, let me deploy, continuous deployment, but not release. So you're releasing on demand. Your release cycle may be quarterly. So now the notion of, you can fix your release date and then what goes into it. And this is something that is, not new. I've learned this in the past decade. As the director of software engineering, we went towards what we call a quarterly release. The only thing then is what gets onto the release. So this is something that's not new, but again, had to be relearned into how do we adjust with this smaller slice of work that we need to get feedback. Instead of waiting for it, let's get a small feedback. So back in 2010, as I started my journey, it was pretty much, what is wrong with what we've got? Is it the people? Do we need to adjust the people? Do we need to change the people? Do we need to hire new people? What is the problem that we got? Is it a people problem? And this is something I learned early on in 2010 was, when my senior VP looks at me and says, Richard, it is not the people. It is the process, it is the environment. So you have to fix those things first, right? And then the last thing you probably look at may be the people. Most of the time, it is not the people. So we have to take care of our people. And in this notion, in the past, we always treat them as resources. It sounds like, think about what resources means. It means that something that can be depleted, right? So this is notion of moving away from treating individuals as resources, but treat them as people. So we have to, invest in our people. And how the people interact with each other is important. How do we interact with them? How does the managers, how does the company, how does the environment allow our people to grow? And that's one of the things that I've learned in this decade as well. Now, when we put all these people together and try to get them to build something, what I've seen is that software development is not an individual game. It is a team-based game. So when people get together, they have to work as one. This notion of having an expert and all they do is something, and that's all they do, it is pretty dangerous. As a manager, I've seen it firsthand. I had a senior developer with me that all she worries about, is that one key module, and the most critical module, and she's the only one that knows how to fix it, or the only one to do that knows everything about it. What truly happened is that because of that, she can't go on vacation. Anytime that she's sick or things like that, the company gets into a jam. So as a manager, I have to find ways to de-risk that. So it is in the best interest of the manager and also for the individuals to make sure that there's somebody to help cover or to learn the intricacies of the importance of those critical modules as well. So now there is 2 people. Now we can have more people that knows it. In the event that this person is sick or needs to take vacation, somebody else can still take on the work. And what if this person hits a lottery, for example? You do want to make sure that the company is also taken care of. So it's a win-win situation. So we want to create this effect of a team, people knowing or understanding how to work as one and learning each other's craft. Yes, we still recognize that you may be really good, that is maybe your expertise in your domain, but somebody else that learned it, we don't need that person to be an expert. But if they are, that's great, but we don't need. As long as they can help out, it also de-risks the situation, right? And you want it to be shared so that they can help each other out. Another one of those that I've learned in the last decade is to look at things in the bigger picture. It's what we call system thinking. Instead of trying to optimize a specific, for example, QA, or for example, testing, instead of just optimizing them, we want them to, we want to look at the whole system from beginning to end. Instead of optimizing just the sales department, instead of optimizing just the development department, we want to look at the whole entire what we call value stream, from the time that somebody makes an order to the time that we get our product out to users. We got to look at it in terms of one, which is what we call system thinking. So there's something that I learned is that when we try to optimize the whole, sometimes things that we would do as individual group may not be the best idea. It may be great for that one group, but it's going to bring down everybody else down. So we got to start thinking as a whole. The last thing that I want to share with you is this notion of having the time to inspect, a time to reflect. And it's something I learned during my MBAs, but I just don't know how to apply it a decade ago. So now in this decade, I learned that we have to actually allocate the time for ourselves, for individuals to say, hey, let's take the time, let's stop, let's inspect and adapt. How can we be better? What do we need to adjust? So there's this notion of, oh, it's not my job to do it, somebody else will have to do it for me, or we put somebody to be in charge of this, inspection, adaptation, or innovation. I think that's not the best way of doing it. Ideally, collectively, we tend to have a much better idea than one individual. So allocate the time, have the time, block a time to do inspection and adaptation, have the time to reflect. This decade has been an awesome decade for me. Starting in 2010 until now, I've learned a lot. I'm looking forward to 2020. I'm looking forward to the new decade. It is a new journey for me. As I end this decade, I'm at an impasse. I don't know what my future holds. I don't know what the next decade holds. But knowing what I know today, I have less worries than I have a decade ago. I truly am looking forward to the next decade, to the next challenge, to see what else can we as a society, as the people, as a human in us, as in terms of how we can get better at what we do. So that's it, folks. I hope I see all of you again. If this is your first time here, do subscribe. And if you have any questions or any videos that you want me to do, please be sure to put in the comment below. Bye.